Wow, and story out of the New York Times explaining how not all, to be fair, a lot of different Republicans are angling to run in 2020. Wait a minute, there's a Republican president, and he'd be up for a second term in 2020. They're like, yeah, sure. Sure, he'll still be there. Sure, he'll be running, and he'll be unopposed, of course. Okay, so now let's give you the details. As you can tell, it also involves his own vice president. President Trump's first term is ostensibly just warming up, the New York Times explains, but luminaries in his own party have begun what amounts to a shadow campaign for 2020, as if the current occupants of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue weren't involved. So who are the players here? Senators Tom Cotton and Ben Sasse, I like to call him classy Ben Sasse, even though that's not how his name is pronounced because it's fun, have already been to Iowa this year. Governor John Kasich is eyeing a return visit to New Hampshire, and Mike Pence's schedule is so full of political events that Republicans joke that he is acting more like a second-term vice president, hoping to clear the field than a number 2 sworn in a little over just 6 months ago. So, if you're unfamiliar with politics, going to Iowa is a telltale sign that you're running for president. You don't randomly go to Iowa, which is the first state to have a caucus, and New Hampshire. Like, oops, did I wind up in Iowa and New Hampshire? What fun 2 random states that I went to as a senator. No, that means I'm running for president. Now, it doesn't mean it every time, but it means it most of the time. And certainly it's a way of dipping your toe in to test the waters. How am I received in Iowa and New Hampshire? They're not randomly going to Alaska and Nebraska because they don't have the first 2 contests in a presidential election. Iowa and New Hampshire do. So Tom Cotton, I see you, brother. Tom Cotton, who's like, oh yeah, Trump, sure, fine. Hey, what's going on in Iowa? I got to get over there. At least Sasse has the honesty to admit that he is opposing Trump on many issues, and Kasich has been very blunt about it. So there's no issue at all. Kasich ran against him before, hasn't supported him, didn't support the healthcare proposal. He thinks there's he has a different view on what it means to be a conservative. So he's doing this in plain sight. Okay. Now, the would-be candidates are cultivating some of the party's most prominent donors, courting conservative interest groups and carefully enhancing their profiles. Mr. Trump has given no indication that he will decline to seek a second term. So, ding, 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 that's signpost number 2. You go to Iowa, New Hampshire, that's 1. Number 2 is donors, where the money at? Okay, show me the money. Now, you can claim that you're raising for your own Senate candidacy. I don't know what the vice president would be raising for in a first term. Did you know that his PAC, Pence has his own PAC, we'll get to it, and it has raised more money than Trump's PAC? Why don't you make it a little bit more obvious, right? There is no campaign for the vice presidency that would come up in a re-election. If it was a second term, yeah, the vice president's likely to run for president, it makes a lot of sense. In the first term, that's just going, just in case. All right. Lindsay Walters, a White House spokesperson, says, no. The president is as strong as he's ever been in Iowa, and every potentially ambitious Republican knows that. By the way, that's the White House not denying the story. That's saying the story is true, but they better watch themselves because we're strong in Iowa and we'll kick their ass. Interesting. John McCain is asked about it. He says, I love this quote. They see weakness in this president. Look, it's not a nice business we're in. In other words, they're gonna cut you if they think you're weak, especially Republicans. All right, now let's go to Kasich. Mr. Kasich has been more defiant. The Ohio governor, who ran unsuccessfully in 2016, has declined to rule out a 2020 campaign in multiple television interviews and has indicated to associates that he may run again, even if Mr. Trump seeks another term. So Kasich, I pardon you. He's being honest about it, that's all. He probably will run against Trump. Have at it, Hoss. The duplicitous ones are the interesting ones, especially Pence. Now, New York Times continues, most significant, multiple advisors to Mr. Pence have already intimated to party donors that he would plan to run if Mr. Trump did not. Now, to be fair, it's if Trump didn't, but boy, they're making a lot of plans. So they apparently don't have a lot of faith that either Trump's going to be in office at that time or that he's going to be in good enough shape to even seek re-election, which is a very, very low bar. Okay, the vice president created his own political fundraising committee, Great America Committee, shrugging off warnings from some high-profile Republicans that it would create speculation about his intentions. The group, set up with the help of Jack Oliver, a former fundraiser for George W. Bush, has overshadowed Mr. Trump's own primary outside political group, America First Action, even raising more undisclosed donations. Yeah, you don't set up this committee and get all these folks if you're not interested in running, but I've got more. Mr. Pence has made no overt efforts to separate himself from the beleaguered president. He has kept up his relentless public praise and even in private is careful to bow to the president. Now, we showed you that in previous weeks because it's a very smart move by Mike Pence. Number one, you go both on TV, which Trump watches, and in person to Trump go, oh, Mr. President, I bow to you. Oh, you are so great, Mr. President. Me, raise money behind your back and go to Iowa and go to these events and tell donors I might run? I would never do that. I bow to you, Mr. President, I bow to you. So he does that to keep his job. Well, that might not be in Trump's control anyway, but it's smart politically to do to keep the president happy. Plus, more importantly, he gets to turn around if something happens to Trump to all the Trump voters and go, I was behind your guy the whole time. Don't you remember me embarrassing myself on national TV going, oh, Mr. Trump, you are so right. It's been the greatest honor and privilege of my life to even be seated next to you. So it is crafty, but let's get you more details if you're not convinced. Mr. Pence also installed Nick Ayers, a sharp-elbowed political operative, as his new chief of staff last month. A striking departure from Vice President's long history of elevating a government veteran to be their top staff member. Mr. Ayers had worked on many campaigns, but never in the federal government. This thing's over. You don't hire a political operative who's never worked in the federal government if you're not interested in running a political race, let alone the fact that you made him your chief of staff. In other words, this is the only thing I care about. He's not alone, to be fair. Let's go to Nikki Haley. She's the ambassador to the United Nations and a former governor of South Carolina. And she put her longtime pollster on the payroll and has gotten better acquainted with some of New York's financiers, since the UN is in New York, and carved out a far more muscular foreign policy niche than Mr. Trump. Look, you can say, hey, Republicans, she's gonna go to meet with donors all the time, even though as UN ambassador, what do donors have to do with your job? I don't know. Okay, fine. But you hired a pollster? What are you polling? The opinions of Zimbabwe on our latest UN resolution? There's no reason for a political pollster to be on the staff of a UN ambassador. No, these people are brazenly going out there going, yeah, of course we're gonna run when this schmuck implodes. I mean, turn on the TV. Can't you see with your own eyes? Man, this kind of insubordination is fascinating. And Trump usually hates this stuff. But again, you know why they do this so publicly and openly? Because they think he's too stupid to figure it out. And until the New York Times spelled it out for him, was probably true. All right, of course Mike Pence is gonna deny it, so here's his denials. He says, today's article in the New York Times is disgraceful and offensive to me, my family, and our entire team. Why do they always bring family into it? No, nobody talked about your family. Nobody cares what your wife is doing, okay? But always like with these guys, like I'm a good Christian. So my family is offended that you have pointed out how much money I've raised. Well, did you raise the money or didn't you? Finally, we go to that denial. The allegations in this article are categorically false and represent just the latest attempt by the media to divide this administration. And then he went on to call New York Times fake news. I know, Trump will give you a nice pat on the head for that. But which part is fake? Now you can say, well, I didn't really say that to the donors and my advisors didn't really say that to the donors. And that'll be hard to prove, it's a little he said, she said. But did you go to the donors? Yes. Did you raise more money than Trump's PAC and disclose donors? Yes. Did you go to all these events that look like campaign events? They went to the pig roast in Iowa. The pig roast in Iowa? There's only one reason you go there. If you're planning to run for president. Was that false? No, not false. All that stuff is totally true. So if you think, no, Trump's fine, the media is making it all up, you should tell people in his administration and other Republican senators, because they don't think he's fine. They think he's already mortally wounded and they're picking at his carcass. If you like the Young Turks, you'll love Young Turks membership. tytnetwork.com/join.